Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Doctor2Doctor in the Chatroom. We are so happy to have you back with us another Saturday to share this hour. We appreciate you guys coming back. And as we always say, thank you because we cannot do this without you. We hope that you guys are staying safe in this pandemic. We are definitely still in the midst of a pandemic and we want you to be safe. You know, wear your mask and do all the stuff that we talk about every week, social distancing and washing your hands and try not to congregate in large crowds if you don't have to. And when you do have to, use all of those necessary precautions to stay safe. I just want to say hello again to my illustrious co-host, Dr. Nicole West. How are you, ma'am?
Oh, I'm doing very well. I love that description of myself. Illustrious.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't, I think one week we were celebrating daughters and another week we were celebrating sons. We don't have anybody to celebrate today, do we?
I don't think so.
No?
No.
How about we celebrate ourselves today? How about
That's right. Yeah, I like it.
And our lovely guest today, who you're going to hear from momentarily, we always say that we like to provide you with information and topics that are relevant to our communities and to our world. And that's what we try to do every week. And this week is no different. We want to talk about something that I actually, after reading a little bit about it, really just consider it somewhat of an epidemic in our, in America. We have today with us Miss Charie Carrol. I hope I did not mess her name up.
You did good.
Do it for me. Give it to me.
No, you did good.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was sure. You did good.
Thank you so much, Miss Carrol. We appreciate you being here with us today. Miss Carrol is from Room in the Inn.
Yep.
She's a family advocate for Room in the Inn in Memphis, Tennessee, and she's going to talk to us today about this topic of homelessness. I thought about, we're the holidays are up on us. I can't believe that, but they are pretty much here. Once you start thinking about celebrating Halloween, and it's kind of like, then there's Thanksgiving, then there's Christmas. And, I know that homelessness does not go away at any time of the year, but it just seems like it's so much more sad to me when I'm, during the holiday season and I see people that, don't have family and don't even have, a place to stay. But as always, there are so many things that we see around us. We see it and we don't see it. It's kind of like almost like white noise sometimes, it's noise, but you don't hear it. And so many times when we think we know what things are and when we think we know what they look like, and we don't necessarily know. And I think this is probably one of those cases. So Miss Carrol, thank you again for being here. And just tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and what you do.
Awesome. So thank you, ladies, first for having me on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about homelessness any chance I get. So my name is Charie Carrol. I am the family advocate on the floor for Room in the Inn, which is a shelter for, we have 2 floors, but my floor is a shelter for families experiencing homelessness. So my background, I have a bachelor's degree in social work studies and social sciences from the University of Memphis, go Tigers. So pretty much that's my professional background. I'm always super involved in the community, and mainly a part of that is because of what I do as a family advocate. Connecting to resources and finding what's out there is critical to helping these families connect to what they need to connect to. So along with just a personal passion for just serving in the community, various volunteer opportunities is also part of my job. They depend on me to be able to be the bridge between what they need and how to get there and where do I go. So that's just a little bit about me.
Okay, so as I was saying earlier, there were reported pre-pandemic over 580,000 people that were living, in homelessness situations in America. And the report said that like 70% of those were like individuals. And then there was like a mere like 30% that were like families with children. So let's just start with that. What is homelessness? Give us like the solid definition of what homelessness is and give us some examples of what, people experience with it.
Sure. So by definition, homelessness is a person who is living in a place not meant for habitation. So for us, that looks like the person under the bridge,
Mhm.
maybe you're driving along the street, you see her sleeping on the bench. It's also people who are living in transitional housing or an emergency shelter. So any of those would put you in homelessness. Now, what that looks like, because before I started working, I always just box it into that person under the bridge, the person walking around, talking to themselves down the street that something is just not normal. But a lot of those numbers that we see in report, it's probably the lady that you work with every day that goes to a home with no utilities that you don't know. She's considered homelessness. That's not a place meant for habitation. Or even a family member that's living with you, that's probably lived with you for a month and live with grandma the next month, considered a couch surfer. That is homelessness. So these are images we typically don't think about when we think about homelessness, but homelessness looks just like everyday people that you just don't know, like when they leave their presence, what they're going to. So depending on their living situation, that's what qualifies or classifies them as homelessness. Because even here at the shelter, we encourage our families to work. Working is one of the ways to get them out of homelessness, to get their income coming in so they can go ahead and go from one goal to the next. But a lot of them are working in the school system, working in warehouses, just normal jobs. But when they leave, they are not going to their own home. They're coming to shelter. So by definition, they're homeless. But I mean, when you think of homelessness, you don't think of, oh, I was talking to my coworker today, we were having a good time. I'm going to my apartment, but she's coming to room in the inn, and this is where she's staying until she can get stabilized into her own address.
Mhm.
So that's the definition of homelessness, and that's the part of it that we don't think about, in terms of what it looks like.
Yeah, because when I was working in education, that was one of the things, the transitional piece that you talked about. When I would have students that were living with grandma, and and the school counselors would get involved because the kids were considered homeless, and I was like, I never really thought about that being homeless. It's something else that you said, and I want to ask this question, and if it's not something that you know about or want to answer, it's okay. When we pull up at the light, or we get off the expressway onto, and the person is standing there with the sign, right? Is that typically someone homeless, or is that typically someone that's just out, getting money? Because I've heard so many things about those people, like, it's not always that it's somebody in need.
Right. And you never know. You never know what people's intentions are on those corners, because I've personally seen it both ways. Like I've seen somebody that's really in need and somebody that's just there scamming people, basically. So you don't know, like when you pull up, if you do contribute, you just do it out of the goodness of your heart and hope, that these people are really homeless and they're gonna take this for shelter or food and not put it towards their light bill or their mortgage or whatever it is. But that's the thing, you don't know.
Yeah. I just always wonder, was there, is there something to look for? Like, is there something particularly to look for?
Right. I was at the gas station a couple days ago, and there was a woman that was in at the gas pump next to me. And she was out there with two fairly older kids. One might have been a teenager and the other one might have been, I don't know, 10 or 11. But she was just kind of there for a while. And I had gone to pay for the gas, came back, pumped the gas, and she was still there, and she wasn't pumping gas or anything. So she came over and she said to me, "Ma'am, I just am wondering if you can spare $10." She said, "My two kids, I just am trying to get a hotel tonight for them to be able to take a bath and have a place for them to lay their head." And I didn't have any cash on me because I never do. And when I told her that, she said, "Oh, okay, well, I take Cash App too." So she had, a variety of different, ways to get her needs met. And I said to myself the same thing that you just said. I've got $10 that I can spare. It's really not even up to me what she does with it. Hopefully she takes it and puts it towards a hotel and she can get her, children a good night's sleep.
Right.
I just thought to myself, if that were me in this situation, how hard it would be for me to have to ask a stranger for help. And how, I wouldn't want to be judged.
Right.
I would just want to be helped. And so I just said to myself, I'm just going to give this Cash App this woman $10 and pray that she, makes it work for her the way she needs to. But it just pulled on my heart because I just can't imagine being homeless. And I've always heard people say that the majority of us are one paycheck away from being homeless.
Right.
So it just really brings it home for me when those kinds of situations happen.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like I said, I always wondered, like, was there this one or two things that I can look for and I know, well, okay, this person is really in need. And then now I'm starting to notice that people are having signs that say things like, I'm not a bomb.
Yeah.
I'm not a bomb. I'm out of work. That said, that transitions my thought processes into something that I really didn't talk about, off air. But what about, these folks that are homeless and don't have, the brick and mortar address, and that's what these companies require us to have, a physical address in order to get a job.
Yeah.
You need ID, you need, and just like, how do they get around that? I mean, as with an institution such as the one where you work, how are you guys able to help with things like that?
So, in conjunction too with the hospitality hub. So the hospitality hub is probably the premier place that people go, or homeless people go, when thinking of needing just an address or an ID or something like that. So basically they can use our address because we do recognize that that's a barrier sometimes, even with simple things like them getting health insurance or having to recertify, because most of the time that stuff comes in the mail, and if they have no way to reach you, they are not going to hunt you down and try to find where you are. So, even with barriers like that are essential to them, just their well-being and everything, we let them use our address. Even, at the hospitality hub, they have places where they can store things, because when I first began my intern, it was at the hospitality hub, and I met a man, and he came in and he said, "Look, I'm not coming in for shelter. I'm fine with being in the woods, but I want somewhere to store my stuff. I want somewhere to receive mail." So we let them use our address for things like that, so they don't have to wonder where the mail is going, or,
So can we ask what that is, the hospitality hub?
So the hospitality hub is, it's also an organization that caters to the needs of people experiencing homelessness. So they also do a lot of what we do in terms of providing shelter to people or connecting to resources, helping people to get IDs, employment, just a range of services that they offer, like us as well. So we do a lot of hand in hand with the hospitality hub, because sometimes, whereas a homeless person may come to the hospitality hub, they may not have room, or they may not necessarily qualify. then they may be able to come over to room in the inn and have some place for shelter or whatever they're needing. So, just to answer the initial question that you asked, that's one of the things that we do. We let them use our address for whatever mail they need or employment. And even with employment, we work with agencies that we know that kind of know our population. They know the needs of our population, the strengths and everything. So like Empower Employees is a premier agency that we use. So they already know they're employing somebody who's homeless.
Mhm.
They may not have an ID up front. They may not have an address, but they need a second chance and they need to work.
Right.
Just finding those people willing to give that second chance with no judgment of their past is what we try to partner with. And same thing, the hospitality the hub goes by the same thing as well. So that's how we try to help them with that barrier.
Mhm. I noticed, because I know we're going to be going to break real soon, but I noticed that I was thinking of the holiday season. During the holiday season, it seems like resources are kind of amped up a little, right? Or during the winter months, and it's like, when the weather gets, 20 degrees outside, and, why does it seem from the outside looking in that, we as a society, right, can come up with things for people during these times, but, when the weather gets better, it's like you see more people out. It's like it's okay. I'm not saying, I don't want to say that people don't care, but I'm just like, if we can find these resources at a certain time of year, why is it so difficult to find them, otherwise?
Yeah, I think a part of that too is people just not being educated enough on the process of homelessness and what it looks like beyond people on the street. Like that whole process in between when people are in shelter and they don't have enough money to buy diapers or they don't know how to use the bus system to get to work. I don't think people are educated, or maybe they don't see enough of that part of the process. So it's easy to imagine, because thinking about the holidays, you see homeless people on the street all day long in bad weather. So you automatically think, okay, they need a coat, they need socks,
Yeah.
all this stuff. But I think because we don't see enough of the process in between, then we just tend to think that, okay,
It's that white noise again.
yeah.
We're here with Miss Charie Carrol. We're talking about homelessness in America. And we're going to continue that discussion when we come back from break. We'll be right back on 94.7 FM.
And we are back. Thank you for sticking around with us. We are here with Miss Charie Carrol, and she is talking to us today about a very important topic, homelessness. Charie, I wanted to see if you could really just kind of give us some information about who might be most at risk for homelessness and tell us some reasons why.
Sure. When thinking about homelessness, and not even just tying it specifically to a specific race or ethnicity, but people who live in underserved areas where the community resources are just not there, or even if the community resources are there, not having access to transportation. The bus system in reality is not that friendly. So it's not that safe for a family, traveling. The bus is sometimes not the safest option. It's for a single mother who's traveling alone. So people in underserved areas who either they lack the resources or they just don't know where to go or they can't get there. Also, I think too, an area that we really don't think of is people who are renting, but renting to slum landlords. Because we've seen where you may be living in a house, and I can't blame people for not wanting to live in a house. Again, that's not meant for habitation, but you need a place to stay. So when you finally make that decision to say, I can't do this anymore, or it's putting my kids into jeopardy, people just leave. Like sometimes they don't know the proper way to leave or how to leave. They just leave. So then it
Mhm.
puts them in homelessness. Then you start dealing with evictions and it's hard to get somewhere else. So I think all of these, factors put people at risk to be homeless.
Mhm.
Yeah. What do you say to those people? Because there are some people that have the attitude that, well, you must not have done what you needed to do.
Mm.
You didn't go to school, you didn't, get educated. So you not being able to take care of yourself, is a fault of your own. What do you say to those people? Because not everybody who's homeless, you know, made quote unquote bad choices. There's some people that got laid off from their job that they've been at for years, or some people who um for one reason or another, maybe they became disabled or got injured. What do you say to those people with the belief or the attitude that homeless people caused their situation, or didn't do something correctly and that's why they're homeless?
Well, I think here what we do, and I'll speak from a Romanian perspective, is we create a culture of hospitality to those who come into shelter. So it could be a simple thing as good morning, how are you doing? Even when I'm doing case management, I don't necessarily go back into what they did, how they got here, unless I'm talking about housing and it's something that I really need to know. But what I always tell them is, I can't change what you've done in the past. You can't change it either. So the focus shifts to, man, I did this, or man, this got me here. Okay, that happened. But what are we going to do now to move past it? So it's just that constant encouragement day to day, whether it's, hello, how you doing? Hey, I'm just checking in on you to make sure you're good. Or even simply if they're asking for toothpaste, like not making a big deal about
Yeah,
it, not making them feel shame about asking for things that they don't have. So it's
right.
small things that you build up. And while you're building them up in that way, then they stop so much thinking about, oh my God, I got here because I made this decision. And
Hmm.
motivation to say, okay, I got one thing accomplished. So they feel like they can continue
Yeah,
to accomplish other things
Mhm.
without negative thing in the back about how I got here. Because we can't change how you got here. You can't either. So
right.
we have to find a way to move forward and point out the good things from there.
And I
I,
think those of us on the outside looking in have to really come with that mindset of, until I walk in your shoes,
yep.
I really just cannot sit in the judgment seat,
Yeah.
and I just think we do that a lot, just as a people. We sit in the judgment seat without, as you said, being informed.
Yeah.
You were talking about being educated. We have to be more informed, and that's how we don't end up being judgmental
Hmm.
and categorizing people, based on their circumstances. Being in the church all my life, there was this song this girl used to sing. You don't know when your condition will be like mine, right?
Hmm.
You just
Hmm.
don't know. Like you say, we could be just like one paycheck away. So, yeah.
And I love how it sounds like the approach there is to help to maintain people's humanity and their dignity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my whole thing is they get enough of being beat up from the world. And it's not even people, most of the time, it's not strangers, it's people that's close to them. So they bring in all this trauma, all this hurt and everything. So the idea is just when they're here, even if for a moment, it's just a sense of safety, a sense of peace, and it's a no judgment zone.
So is there, it sounds like you guys have like this holistic approach. So you talked about the hospitality hub, do you collaborate with other organizations to help deal with the trauma? Are you doing all of those things?
Yeah, so it is a holistic approach for us because our whole thing too, thinking of long-term is we know they're not going to be here forever. Eventually they're going to transition out. But while they're here, to put those things into place so they can sustain after they leave. So yeah, we collaborate with other community organizations like that providing like therapy, parenting classes, financial classes. And
Wow.
also, like I mentioned earlier, Empower Our Employees, that's a staffing agency that we use, even collaborating with MIFA for financial assistance for them enrolled in the rapid rehousing program so they can have a step ahead with depositing first month's rent, Community Alliance for the Homeless. So yeah, it's a collaborative effort amongst everybody. Almost every nonprofit, I would say, in Memphis can collaborate to or can contribute to homelessness in some type of way, whether a workshop or a class or financially. It's just us finding who does what and connecting and say, hey, can you come here and do this? So yeah, we collaborate as much as possible.
Mm.
Are the majority of your residents single people or families with children? What does your population at?
Yeah, so
What does it look
right.
like?
Now it has 2 floors. We do have a recuperative care floor downstairs that deals with medically fragile individuals who don't have a place to heal while they're healing. So instead of going back on the streets, they come here and receive case management. And that population is single people. Now with the families upstairs, it is mostly single moms and at least 2 kids or more. Like we've had ranging families from 2 kids all the way up to 7 kids.
Wow.
In our shelter take married couples because that's still a family. As long as they're legally married, we do accept a husband and wife team, which that's one of the things I really love about Room in the Inn, because before, if you went into shelter as a husband and wife, the children and the woman stays together, but the male has to go somewhere else.
Right.
So the family is separated. That's one of the things that we don't do at Room in the Inn. The family stays together.
I love that.
So what about how long do the families get to stay there? I mean, like, is there like an expiration date? I'm sure like and during that time, I'm sure you guys are saying, okay, you can only be here for this amount of time. So we got to get started on, this. Yeah, start the process. Okay.
Yeah, so collaboration. So our families come in through MIFA. So when they come in, they're probably already enrolled in the rapid rehousing program. So they give us 30 days to work with these families to shelter them and feed them. They don't pay for anything while they're in shelter. So they give us 30 days to do case management with whatever they need with the families, primarily housing, but they need employment, childcare, anything in between. We get 30 days to be their partner in crime to make it happen for them.
Okay.
30 days sounds like a good length of time, but when you think about, combating homelessness, I bet, to the families, it's like, okay, this is a bit of a breather. We have a roof over our head, but man, that 30 days probably, ends pretty quickly.
Yeah, it goes by fast. And I used to think 30 days was so harsh because in reality, sometimes it takes more than 30 days to get somebody rehoused, and we can kind of advocate on their behalf if it goes to that. But also on the flip side of that, sometimes 30 days is a motivation for some of them. A motivation that this time I need to get it right.
Yeah.
So I kind of have a dislike with 30 days. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I hate it, but all in all, I do think it's a good motivator for most people. You got 30 days, so you can't be sleeping around in shelter, watching TV. No.
Yeah, you got to get to work.
Right.
It was about this time last year, maybe, when I had a lady on from the U.S. Census Bureau. And, we talked about, trying to get that count for the homeless population. What does that process look like? Because she really helped me to understand how important it is to get a good count so that all of the special populations that need funding, right? Special funding, they can get it, but if we don't get the count. So what's done differently? I know if somebody comes through an organization such as the one you're with, you can get a count on that. But what about the folks that are, on the corners and sleeping on the park benches and under the bridges and all of that, underneath the bridges?
Yeah, so the community for the homeless, the Alliance, they actually once a year do a point in contact count. So volunteers go out on the streets and they actually go to a person who's homeless. They get as much information as they can. And not only do they try to get a count, it's also a way of reaching out to say, hey, if you're open to it, I have this resource for you that can help you. So it's also kind of a way to try to bring them into shelter so they're not on the streets. But you have that way to get a count. We also use a system, all the nonprofits. It's a coordinated entry system. So, hey, if somebody comes to room in the end and Michael doesn't know, but Michael still helps someone who's homeless, we can still get the count that way because everybody has access to the system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are two ways that we try to keep the count going as well. But yeah, once a year they hit the streets and try to get an count of people who may not come into shelter.
And are those people very skeptical about giving information? Because that was one of the things that she talked about, not necessarily with homeless people, but just with people in general, and certain populations, didn't really like giving their information about, or being a part of the census, thinking, people, for instance, that's been in the system, like that's been incarcerated or whatever, didn't want to give out their information. Is it the same with the homeless population? Are they very skeptical?
Yeah, they're very skeptical. I mean, we all have trauma, but the trauma is sometimes heightened with somebody who's experiencing homelessness.
Sure.
A lot of them have trust issues. They don't want to give you their information, or some of it is just shame and embarrassment. They don't even know. Some of them don't even know how they got to this point. They don't know how to tell you how they got to this point, or they don't know what they're going to do with their information. So yeah, it is a lot of reserved things. Even here, I mean, some things we don't find out about the families until 3 weeks. Oh, this happened to me, and I'm just now telling you about it because I feel comfortable with you now. But on the end, yeah, that wasn't something that I felt comfortable disclosing. So yeah, it's the same.
Wow. Can you speak to COVID and homelessness a little bit? Have there been any impacts that COVID-19 has had on homelessness?
Yeah. One of the issues that we have with homelessness is housing, especially getting people into like a second chance housing, somebody willing to give them a second chance. So I brought that up because COVID, with the memorandums and the regulations, you have people who are living in housing that the landlords cannot evict because of COVID. So what that is, we cannot move people out of shelter into housing. So while we can't move people out of shelter, there are people still out there living in abandoned buildings that cannot get into shelter. So it's like a domino effect, and even in shelters. So we can't take as many people in at one time as we used to be able to. Or when there's somebody testing positive, then you have to quarantine and stop. So again, you quarantining for 2 weeks, but homelessness is still happening, and people are trying to figure it out for those 2 weeks and just hope it's okay.
Yeah.
So COVID has definitely impacted in a lot of ways that I just didn't, especially with the landlord thing. That's still just, I'm like,
Mhm.
they're frustrated.
You know what? I didn't even think about it from that perspective. I mean, I thought about it on the positive side. Well, there are people living in places that that can't be evicted, thank God, right? Like they're not going to be put out on the streets.
Right.
But for an institution that's trying to help the people that are on the streets, right?
Mhm.
You
Right.
guys can't, like do the rollover and get people out and get other folks in to help. So I didn't even think about it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good. Like you said, I agree that people are kept in the housing, but it's like a domino effect. People are kept in, and then you have people who are kept
Who
out.
are being kept out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're going to be getting ready for break in a moment, but I was wondering if you, when we come back from break, if you could possibly kind of give us a breakdown in terms of ethnicity, race, and what homelessness looks like as well, because I know you mentioned in underserved communities. You mentioned that early on in the interview, and maybe you can just kind of break it down for us and give us a really good view of what it looks like by ethnicity and race. Let's talk more about homelessness with Miss Charie Carrol from Room in the Inn. She's a family advocate there in Memphis, and we're going to talk more with her when we come back from break. We will be right back on WLJG.com.
Before you
And we are still here with Miss Charie Carrol of Room in the Inn. She's a family advocate for homelessness in Memphis, Tennessee. And we're just talking about homelessness overall in America. I wanted you to talk a little bit about, the ethnic piece and the racial breakdown of homelessness, and just give us a really good look of what that looks like.
Oh, sure. So primarily in terms of race, a large percentage is people of color, primarily African American. And it was something that came up about people of color, Hispanics. I said, oh, Hispanics, they're good. They're not homeless. They cluster together, and all these stereotypes around it, when right after African Americans, it's almost tit for tat, it's Hispanics. The thing about Hispanics is culturally, they just don't come and openly ask for help. So they just tend to figure it out the best way they can. And it's just a very close knit thing. So they may be homeless, but there's that unaccounted for population of homelessness. So primarily it's people of color when you look at homelessness for various reasons. If you look at the underserved areas or the areas that people may be below poverty line, that's what you will see. And that's not to say that there aren't Caucasians and other races, but if you go into those neighborhoods and look, you will primarily see people of color. And I mean, in those areas, again, you don't have the resources that need to be there to what they may need to combat homelessness. So it's just this never ending cycle of homelessness in those areas, unfortunately. Now,
what I think I just,
yeah,
I'm sorry. What I think I just heard you say, something was really something that was really interesting, made me think possibly, are we grossly underestimating the number of homeless people that we have in this country? Because you had mentioned, there's groups of people that kind of cluster together, and it's just part of their culture that they, but your definition early on in the interview was that if you are, kind of living with someone, whether it's a family member or not, and so I'm thinking about those groups of people that do live closely together, and they're not counted in those numbers. So it just kind of led me to wonder: are we really aware of how much of a problem homelessness actually is, and are we just underestimating possibly the number of people that need, services.
Right. And I agree with you too. I think it is underestimated because we don't think of a family member who's bouncing around from house to house as necessarily homeless because that's my family member. I'm
Yeah.
him stay with me. I mean, he's not out on the streets. He's still getting fed. So, but by definition, that person is considered homelessness.
And we may even call them a bum, right?
Yeah.
or mooch or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But we don't consider them as homeless because chances are we're not just letting them, live out on the streets.
Yeah.
I heard a very interesting thing when it comes to families, and it was actually one of the families during intake, and it stuck with me. He said, people don't consider you homeless, and I mean people like family, they don't consider me homeless until I'm a problem and I gotta get out. Then I'm a problem. I become homeless, and I was like,
wow.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I have to say this, where I live, I see a lot of people that, I feel like they claim certain benches, right? And they have all their bags and all of their goods, and again, like you said, not even trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
Right. What got them there, I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I imagine, like, if I had to just stick as much of my belongings in a bag, in a few bags as I can, handle and carry it around with me all day and, figure out how to guard it and, not have a decent place that I can go use the restroom because businesses don't want these people coming in just to, get to go to the restroom or, I don't have a place to bathe or, and I, as a person that hasn't experienced it, I thank God that I haven't experienced it, but I wish there was something that, even if I could make a small difference, right? And so when I feel really bad, sometimes I've gone to eat and I have had leftovers and I've seen people and I've offered it, right? But I felt really bad. I felt like, I was raised, I had a grandmother that always say, you don't give some people something you don't want, you don't give them your old clothes,
Right.
Feel like, okay, I'm giving them my leftovers, right? When I would have bought a meal had I seen them, prior, I'm saying, and I don't know, I just feel so horrible about it. I just think it's one of the worst things because these folks, living in the elements and I know they probably get sick and they can't just go to the doctor. I don't know. So I really be honest, I try not to even think about it because I'm a nurturing person and it's just really a tough mental burden for me to carry, to even think about it a lot.
Yeah, most definitely.
I think about everything that you just said, but the things that we take for granted, and as a woman, every month, going through your monthly cycle, I have a place that I can go into the bathroom and do what I need to do. And I have the means to do it. But a lot of homeless women don't. Where do they go to freshen up? Or where do they go to, do they even have the necessary, tools to use? I saw something online that was really, really a great idea. It was to have a little, get together of your friends, family, to put together little bags of, sanitary napkins. Just the things that we take for granted that we just go into our bathroom and pick up to use when we need it. And to give these bags out to, women that you encounter. Because they can't just go into the store and buy it like we can. And I thought that was such a great idea of just a way to give back. Like you were saying, what's one small thing that I can do?
Yeah, and I wonder, there's so many maybe myths or myths maybe to be dispelled or rumors, about homelessness or homeless people. I was at a Walgreens middle of the day, and this guy just wasn't trying to hide or anything. He just used the bathroom just right where he was. But what I thought was interesting, and I mean, and I hope this is not too, as they say, too much information for people, but it's real. It really happened, right? What I thought was interesting about it was the way that he was like turning around, like he was purposely. It was as if he was trying to use it on like everything around him.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said to me that that person was marking their territory. And I thought, well, that could be true, kind of like, well, then nobody else will want to come to that spot. Is there any truth to that homeless people have to mark their territory and protect their little whatever area?
I think that there is a little truth to that, because homeless people most of the time are victims of crime. They are out on the street. They're just out there for people to victimize. I mean, unfortunately, they're just out there. You don't have to break into a house or a car. They're just out. So I think it's a little bit of that. And I think it's also survival mode for them. I think all of us have different modes of survival, but for people living on the street, this is just the way that they've learned to survive. Whether it's because they don't know what resources or where to go, all they know is I've got to stay on the street for today, tomorrow, whatever, and I need to figure out a way to survive, and this is how I'm going to do it. I mean, it just to me comes down to survival mode.
Yeah. And when these people who either don't have family or maybe they're not connected with their family, families, if they pass away, what happens to someone like that?
Unfortunately, even here, like if someone were to pass away, and we do gather that information up front, hey, you have an emergency contact, or just try to figure out who is still in their support circle and try to keep in contact with them. But when they don't, the only thing that we can do is call the city and say, hey, we have such and such, they've passed away, and they take them away and do whatever they do. And I hate to say it like this because it sounds so harsh, but to dispose of the person's body.
Sure.
Yeah. The harsh reality of it. So,
and I think it's the harsh reality that we want the audience to get, right? So that as a society, we can try to do better about how we're going to combat this epidemic, because it's an epidemic if that many folks are listed, are on record as homeless, and then we are, as Dr. West said, and we've not even truly calculated the real amount. So it's the harsh reality that we need to deal with.
Right.
And hopefully this will help us to, be more compassionate, maybe have more grace, more patience, because, I just can't imagine what being homeless must be like. And I'm, it's just a hard topic to talk about, but hopefully this will help people to, want to help a little bit more and to be a lot less judgmental, and a lot more caring. We could all use a lot more compassion. Charie, can you talk to us a little bit about the most common forms of assistance to help families or individuals who are experiencing homelessness?
Sure. So even if a family is out or an individual is out like in the daytime. So there are day shelters where they can come and shower or just sit down or maybe get a cup of coffee or water. And the hospitality hub is one of those places that they can go. So a lot of the day shelters and food pantries are located like in a downtown area because that's where most of the homeless population is.
Okay.
The hospitality hub is a great resource for just connecting. Also for MIFA, for families who need, they're homeless, they need shelter. MIFA also offers financial assistance. So within that rapid rehousing program, they also offer deposit and first month rent assistance to help that family kind of get a footing. You have the CSA, Community Service Organization, with utility bill assistance, rent and mortgage assistance. You also have, Community Alliance for the Homeless. They are also a resource hub, very similar to the hospitality hub. They help people through shelter and employment and just getting stabilization out of homelessness. So you have those forms of assistance right here within the city that people can tap into. And I mean, if all else fails, I always say if a person just does not know where to start at the hospitality hub if you're a single individual or even a family, or start at MISA. And then you have people in place to kind of help work you
Got
through.
Yeah.
There, so you're not alone. Because it's a lot to deal with at one time. But just start at that one place and somebody will grab your hand and say, okay, let me show you the way now.
Mhm.
Does your organization take, donations or anything like that? If so, would you tell us how and, people could contribute?
Yeah, so we are on all forms of social media. So every Thursday, we always post what we need, like things the shelter may be in need of. So you can always drop off at 409 Airs what we need. We're on Volunteer Odyssey. You can see all the volunteer opportunities of just how to contribute and give back. If you want to make a financial donation, you can go on RITI, that's RITI.org, the website. And there you can find out just more about the organization and you can donate as well. So those are various ways that people can donate or find out what they can do to help out here.
What about our lawmakers and our leaders? What should be their mindset when it comes to homelessness? Is there more? Obviously, there's more to be done, and what do we do to get their attention? Because I know we talk a lot about education, funding education, which is very important. We talk a lot about funding healthcare, but as Dr. West said earlier in the interview, seemingly we say these things happen to folks because of something that they did or they didn't do. So, how do we change that? How do we change that mindset?
Right. So I think it's important to utilize the community centers and the libraries, making sure those are stocked up with information that people can tangibly get to. Also, I think one of the biggest things is all of the lovely abandoned buildings in the city. If the city, I don't know what they're doing with them. I don't know yet if there's a plan for that because the summit is happening later this month. But if we could just begin to think of how we can use these buildings for more transitional space to educate people there while sheltering them so they don't fall into this cycle, financially educating them, empowering them with goals just a little more than 30 days so people can really get a good fitting. Even if it's one person that doesn't go back, there's still one person out of the cycle of homelessness.
Yeah.
So I hope that that's in the plans for the summit about all these abandoned buildings.
Yeah. Just real quick, do you know of any cities that have been able to, utilize abandoned buildings or any other resources or things, and they've been able to really combat the problem of homelessness in their cities?
The only one that I know of is Ohio has a really good program. one of the families came from Ohio, and she was just so angry about how our system is here because they actually are more hands-on. They give you a house and say, go to this house. You know, we say, go find a house and figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's the only one that I know of that really has the momentum of helping people more hands-on.
We really want to have you back on the show because I'm interested now in, you know, what is it like for the rural areas? I mean, I think we talk about the big cities and, you know, like you said, and typically downtown areas and all of that, but you know, how it's impacted the rural areas in our country, in our state. All right. Thank you again for coming. Thank you, co-host. It's good to see your face in the place again. And we hope to see you guys back next Saturday. As we say, the same chat channel, same chat time. We'll see you next Saturday at the same time on 94.7 FM.